So this is going to be slightly contrived. We're going to have a live event, but we're also recording it. What we've been finding has been helpful in the past is people who can't make it. You know, we're trying to walk the talk, particularly talking about hybrid kinds of things. So we're constantly playing around with different ways of, you know, sort of the TiVo of academic, you know, workshop is being able to play it back later. So this, my name's John Fritz. I'm here representing Division of Information Technology. A little background just on how this conversation got started. Both Katie Morris and Tim Hardy had gone through the alternate delivery program through summer and winter. Katie has been also a peer mentor or a peer reviewer at several of the workshops and also at the required deliverable presentations, of which our first for summer is tomorrow. So if you have been through the workshop or if you're thinking about it and you sort of want to get an idea of what is required in this sort of short show and tell demos, come tomorrow. Also, if you can't make it, take a look at the archives because that's often a great way to get a sense of how people are doing it. And just, you know, interestingly, Katie, when we had first started in 2005, wasn't able to do it at that time, but joined, you know, sort of in the jump rope game in 2007. But you know, I consider these conversations ongoing, and depending on when people can make it, that's when we do it. So Katie has been doing some interesting things with sort of assessing what the impact of hybrid learning is, and particularly looking at something that we have had for a while, but not a lot of adoption. That's the Quality Matters rubric. Similarly, Tim, you know, we got interested in doing some things with both the summer hybrid course and then this last fall. I also started working on that. What I can also tell you as well, and we're still trying to figure out the details, but the provost has provided more support for next year, 6 fall courses and 6 spring courses. So we're going to be trying to get the word out and also target folks on who might participate in that. But as we were trying to kind of put together the tag team, I sort of came up with the developing and assessing quality in hybrid courses. So I guess, Katie, you'll start us off, and then Tim, you'll take us to the end. Yes.
Tomorrow is noon, not 1 o'clock.
Correct. Correct. Today is at 1 o'clock because of times that were.
If you showed up at 1 o'clock, you'd be almost done.
Right. Did I say to come at 1 o'clock tomorrow?
You didn't say.
Okay. All right.
Since today was
Deb would normally smack me there, you know, if I got it wrong there. Okay, so we'll turn it over to Katie and then follow up with Tim. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Katie Morris. I'm here at UMBC. As John mentioned, I've been teaching in the hybrid format and just actually recently converted my hybrid class to an online course this past winter. And so prior to doing that, John's actually been talking to me about Quality Matters for a few years here, and I finally got on board with Quality Matters this fall and then took 2 courses with them. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about Quality Matters and kind of what I took from that, and then talk about kind of how I put it into my course. Quality Matters started out, for those of you who did not know, it started out as a FIPSI grant to the Fund to Improve Post-Secondary Education in Maryland, and there's a consortium of colleges that kind of came together and they started looking at basically online courses. When I say online hybrid courses, and you know, what are some of the best practices in those courses, and how are we looking, or what's the quality of these online or hybrid courses? How do we establish that quality? How do we define and measure quality? The focus really in Quality Matters is in going through the training is to focus on course design. So that planning that goes into the course and what the instructor is kind of putting in there. I think one of the biggest things that I really took from the Quality Matters courses, online courses that I took this fall, were that this idea of alignment, and I think this is something that as I started talking about it, I think we as instructors or faculty often do. You know, our goal is to obviously have our course material, our lectures, our readings, our assignments all have alignment, all to kind of have a goal, to get that student to learn the course objectives. But I think one thing that kind of became clear in going through this training is oftentimes we have that in our head and we have the big picture, and our students don't. So when they're in the classroom, we kind of just think they're making that leap. You know, I presented the lecture, I presented the readings, it has a theme, it goes with the assignment, but really making that kind of thread really clear for the students. And so really what I took from the Quality Matters is not only something that I'm using in the hybrid and online format, but also in my kind of face-to-face classes. So the Quality Matters has kind of come up with a rubric where they're looking at evaluating courses, hybrid and online courses. And they've come up with basically 8 factors that support a strong course. And in terms of kind of looking at the different points of this, I'll just kind of run through a few of these. But course overview, how are we introducing the course? A starting point in online or in Blackboard, talking about the purpose of the course, how it's going to run, expectations of not only the students but also the instructor, focusing on learning objectives, whether or not they're measurable. We as a department in social work go through accreditation, so we actually have to have course objectives in each one of our syllabi. I know some departments do that kind of on an individual basis. So really having learning objectives in the syllabus or in the online format. Looking at the assessment and measurement, how are we assessing kind of students' learning? So looking at the assignments, kind of what they're measuring, how those are linked to the learning objectives and the course readings and the course lectures. Making sure we're providing a clear grading policy, examples of student work, or grading rubrics so students really know how they're going to be assessed. And then of course like the resources and materials that maybe we're providing to students, lectures, online materials, perhaps videos in some courses. And another component they're looking at is this learning engagement. In this online kind of hybrid world, students are really learning there's learning that's happening kind of in that virtual world. And so how is that set up? And I think one thing that I really focused on, and I know John has kind of talked about too, this idea of is this synchronous learning, meaning am I in there with them learning in Blackboard online, or is it asynchronous, meaning I'm putting material up there, students are going in there, capturing that material, taking with it and doing with what they want. And then the final component is are students getting in there and somehow kind of learning from each other, gathering material from each other, like you would kind of in that classroom setting. Because I think that's what a lot of people who have concerns about hybrid or online learning kind of feel, well, there's not that connection. There's not that learning that's happening in the classroom environment, meaning me as the instructor and you as the student are kind of capturing that, or a student to student that way. So kind of how is that happening? The other factors that Quality Matters looks at is the course technology. I think that John and the group have really done a great job talking about in the ADP Alternative Delivery Program, kind of looking at course technology, not just throwing technology into your course, but actually having it have a purpose in your course and kind of tying that to it. I think there's so much that we can do out there with technology, but making sure that it's really kind of working in our course, and then it's sticking to that whole idea of alignment and getting the course objectives, or it's helping the students learn. How we're supporting students with a technical support, and also too with accessibility. This is something actually Quality Matters has just recently added to with the ADA standards and kind of what the institution's policy is on that, and how we're supporting individuals with disabilities kind of in that online or hybrid world. So those are the factors that when you, basically Quality Matters is set up where you can put your course forward and have reviewers review your course based on these 8 factors and score you in terms of what the quality is of your course. And so I think for myself, when I went through this process, it was really helpful for me to be able to assess my own course. A lot of this stuff you can kind of do on your own in terms of how you have things set up and what makes sense. Again, I think as an instructor, when we're setting up Blackboard or setting up our course, I know for me, I do this. I'm like, this makes total sense. And then, you launch it to the students and they're like, where is this, So what makes sense to us versus what makes sense from the student perspective. And so Quality Matters, I think, does a nice job with kind of looking at that, that part. For me, what I kind of learned through this experience is certainly spending time kind of processing what I've learned through trainings. A lot of what I've kind of incorporated in my classes is stuff that I've seen my peers doing. I go to a lot of these, John mentioned the ADP presentations, or tomorrow, I've gone and listened to other individuals presenting in different disciplines on their use of WIMBA or other tools, and I'm like, oh, that would make sense for me in my course in this way. Thinking about how to apply it to my class. I definitely think this idea of being organized in the online and hybrid format, I think things go really quickly. So as much as people can kind of do in advance, I think really helps the course move faster. They seem to move, well, again, because I did teach in the winter, which is like rapid speed. But I think those courses move more quickly than a face-to-face. I mean, really, honestly, we could all prep the night before on a face-to-face. But with a hybrid or online, if you're wanting students to get that material before the start of class, you got to put that material up there before the start of class type thing. And certainly, I think one thing that I've been really open to is both from peers, my colleagues, but also students' feedback in terms of what works, what makes sense in that online or hybrid world. I think some of the best practices that I have taken, and again, not only applied to my online and hybrid classes, but also in my face-to-face, and I'm sure many of us now, even if we have solely face-to-face classrooms, where I rely on Blackboard a lot for not as much as I would in a hybrid or online class, but I certainly do put a lot of material in there. So this whole idea of, from Quality Matters, the idea of a Start Here tab. When you look at Blackboard, there's all the tabs that you can have, lectures, assignments, documents, course documents, whatever it may be. And a Start Here is a really good place to kind of put that. And making it clear to the class how the class will run, putting in the expectations. Again, I think this has even helped me think about in my face-to-face class, just reviewing expectations. What do I expect of you as a student? What should you expect of me as the instructor? In the online and hybrid world, I've done some video tutorials walking them through Blackboard for students who maybe need a little extra help in terms of the technical support. Specifically in online and hybrid world, I definitely use the discussion board for students to kind of talk. Again, that's more of a asynchronous. I'm posting something, they're going in there and sharing kind of thoughts on readings and making connections to maybe readings or lectures or whatnot. I do have students submit all assignments online, and I do actually provide feedback electronically. I actually showed this to my peers when I talked to them about this the other day. I've actually created a rubric, and in Word, I know, John, you've used these kind of forms where you can create kind of drop-down boxes. That's something that's been really helpful that I think in terms of the grading process, you do have to be near a computer when you're grading a paper. But I often find when I do a lot of grading of papers, and I find that I give the similar feedback to students. And so what's nice is I almost feel like I'm more consistent with my grading because when I kind of look at the content, integration of research, organization mechanics, am I kind of giving each student the same grade that way? And so just kind of using like the drop-down box here to kind of check how I'm kind of assessing their work, and then a place for me to kind of just put additional comments, and then a grade. So I found that this tool is helpful. Unfortunately, having access to a computer is something I know a lot of times I used to just read papers outside on my deck or in a comfortable place. So having access to the computer is part of that too, I guess. We'll go back here. Oops. The other part that I use, which actually I hope I'm not repeating Tim on this one, But I did kind of take that idea of, in order for an online and hybrid world, in order for a student to stay enrolled in the class, they need to actually review the Start Here tab and take a quiz and actually score well on the quiz in order to stay in the class. And the quiz is actually a quiz based on due dates and the criteria of the assignments and kind of about Blackboard stuff. It's not a quiz that is material on the course. I also include a couple questions on academic integrity. And the reason that I did this was because I really wanted students to know how, really what the format was going to, and the other questions I ask are, how is the course going to run in the online or hybrid world? And I really wanted students to know ahead what they should expect. And there's no sense remaining enrolled in a course that you don't feel comfortable in. And so I even gave students access to Blackboard and the quiz and everything before the start of classes, and I said, get in there, take it, and if you don't want to be in this class, withdraw, so that you don't have to pay for it. Because I think that's the thing, is that students see maybe hybrid or online courses as being easier. They don't have to be in class. They don't have to go and sit in a classroom, so to speak, so it must be easier, I guess. I don't know where this thought process came from. But it feels like it's out there. And I did actually have about 3 students who withdrew from the course this winter before the start of classes, because I think they realized the intensity of the work and really what was going to go into this next 4 weeks. So I think that's really helpful. Adaptive release feature, I don't know if some of you guys are familiar with some of the features in Blackboard, but this feature allows students to have access to work once they've completed the work in the previous folder. So I put all my course material in folders, and basically class 1, you have access to class 1. Once you complete class 1, you will have access to class 2. I think this idea of kind of helping students be able to click into the next week's work really allows them to see, A, how far behind they might fall in the online world, or B, just to kind of know, like, hey, in order for me to get access to that next week's work, I need to do the work in this week's folder. So I found that has really kind of helped them stay in touch. I have done a lot with online tutorials or video tutorials, and I do a lot still with Jing or Camtasia, if you know some of those programs. However, if you haven't heard of Wimba, that is a program in Blackboard, and I have been most impressed with this program and have used it a lot this past fall and winter. Wimba basically allows you to record PowerPoint slides with your audio, with your voice, and it's a great way to deliver kind of a lecture in the online world. You can record this, you know, there's no length of time or no limit to the time of the video. It goes right into Blackboard, saves it right there, and then students can access kind of these archive lectures. The other thing that I did actually this winter to kind of connect with students in the synchronous world was to have what's called a live Wimba classroom. And so that's a little bit different. I actually provide a time that I'm going to be live in this chat room, so to speak, through Wimba, and they log in and they can talk to me either through text messaging or through a headset, meaning it's almost like having a telephone conversation. Again, John and I have kind of spoken about this kind of asynchronous versus synchronous world. I actually found this really helpful to kind of make a connection with students, and it was really just once a week that I did this. For an hour, I provided myself kind of a check-in time. And I found it really helpful to really see where students were. Again, the idea of it was revolving around kind of a lecture or a topic idea. And students were coming in with questions about assignments or questions about the lecture or something they didn't understand. And I felt like it went really well. This is something that you could have a discussion on discussion board about, but it felt more, it felt like there was more of a connection with these students having it kind of live, so to speak. So I actually think Wimba is a great tool, and I've had great success with it. And I think Blackboard has, it's a good match in the Blackboard setting. The other tool that I do use a lot, especially in the online world, students really liked this. I don't know if anyone's used the tool, the Wiki tool. This basically allows students to create a web page, and it can be a personal web page or a group web page. I have them actually create a personal web page. In the online world, you think about students not really knowing each other or kind of being able to make that connection in the classroom, or the instructor even knowing them. So I create a wiki for myself, and then students create one too, and I tell them to put up a picture of themselves if they feel comfortable with that. If they don't, maybe a place they like to visit. Some people don't feel comfortable putting pictures of themselves. Most I actually found did, because that's the only way they're going to recognize each other. Tell us a little bit about yourself and provide a couple links that you frequent in terms of websites. Students actually love this assignment. I've thought about dumping this assignment a couple of times, but they do love this assignment, and they actually, my feedback, which I'll get to next, in the online world was that students really felt like this was a great way to get to know their peers, because I also tell them you have to go and read each other's wikis, like that's part of it. And they actually found it was a really neat way to kind of know each other, and they actually felt they knew each other better than they would in a face-to-face classroom. Because if Deb's back there and I'm up here in the front of class, I'm never going to maybe make that connection with her. But in the online world, perhaps I would have. And especially since most of our students are so connected in Facebook, they feel quite comfortable getting in there and sharing it all. So those are just some things that I just wanted to kind of say that, what I kind of pull is some of the best practices that I had. John mentioned also talking about the assessment piece. I know this slide is kind of a little bit small, so I'll just kind of review it orally. But I have been teaching this specific course, actually longer than fall of 2008, but I didn't go back that far. So in fall 2008, I taught the course face-to-face. Spring 09, I taught it in hybrid format. Fall 09, I taught it in hybrid format. And winter 10, I taught it completely online. And I basically gathered the means and the medians to several major assignments and their final grade, just because I figured my department would like to know what's going on, like how are students kind of doing. I think there is that idea, are students, not kind of capturing material as well, in the online setting as they are in the face-to-face. My kind of mean or median was pretty comparable throughout. The median for one of their large papers was B+, for both face-to-face and hybrid in the fall, and a little bit higher online in the winter with a low A. The PowerPoint presentation or PowerPoint slides that they do, again, the median grades for all the courses were low A's. The participation portfolio, which really is their online participation, there was no grade in the face-to-face, but for the hybrid and online learning, I actually found the hybrid section, I think I didn't teach it as well in the spring semester in terms of what the expectations were, so I kind of take credit for that as to why that score is more of a C+. And the hybrid for the fall was an A. And actually their online participation, their median grade was like 100. Because I think the thing is I really sent the message home over the winter what my expectations were, and that they really needed to participate online in order to do well in this class. And so they did. In terms of a final grade, I think the lowest grade again was that kind of spring hybrid cohort with a low B, the rest of the grades being a high B. I should actually say what this course is. It's information technology and social work. It's a 200-level course, basically kind of reviewing not only technology and ethics and professionalism, but also a lot of students kind of coming with not very much, a lot of students, let's just say this, in our upper level social work courses are needing to integrate research into their written work, websites, and also scholarly journals, and I'm finding they don't know how to do that. They don't even know how to gather those materials. So this idea of not only gathering resources, but evaluating them is really kind of the focus of the course, and how to use the library database to get scholarly journals is the goal of the course. So the grades were actually quite good. Just some feedback. I know actually someone asked me to kind of pull this together when I was presenting this stuff at my faculty meeting. A lot of students really liked the online world. They didn't think that they would. some kind of thought that it was very fast-paced, which it is because it's in the winter. So it's literally, I think we had 24 days to maybe teach. One student that I actually appreciated this, I thought there was a lot more interaction between students and teachers than probably what they had expected from an online course. They liked being able to complete their work on their own pace and still interact or have that interaction with the instructor and students. Certainly the lack of travel was a nice thing. Some of the things in terms of, again, this is more of what they liked most, going at their own pace, being able to kind of do the course when it worked for them, no set time when they had to kind of do the work. What they didn't like was the limited amount of time. I'm assuming that means the shortness of the course being just 4 weeks, that it was so fast-paced. Some students actually told me that it would have been nice to have 1 or 2 face-to-face classes. Perhaps in an online class that ran in the fall or the spring, I might consider doing that, like the first class meet in person. In the winter, there really is just not enough time. You know, you really have to hit the ground running. In terms of improving the course, you know, really some of this stuff was just in the course, things that I could have given them access to, but that they really, I think, what was helpful for me to see is that the lectures and the tutorials and the readings really did support kind of what they were gathering from there, and they thought that it went well. Any questions or thoughts for me?
One thing I just wanted to point out is, and they emphasize this in the Quality Matters, and maybe while we're making some changes, the Quality Matters piece is really about the course design, not the instructor delivery.
Yeah.
And
said that
I think that that's a really important point, that as you put your course up for a review or you try to go through the rubric that they're developing, the whole point of what they're doing is looking at the course design. How does the course sort of stand on its own, not how you deliver it? And so, yes, Barry.
I'm not sure I caught what you gave them so they could assess that. Was it a syllabus or?
Access to the Blackboard
Right,
course.
access to the Blackboard
Yes.
course.
Yeah.
Yep, and so that's what exactly what they're looking at, is they're looking at
all
how,
through
the course. Yes.
all through the course, to kind of make sure that those topics were addressed. There's a Start Here tab, there's somewhere where they're talking about the expectations. There's this idea of alignment from the course objectives all the way through to the assignments, and the assessment of the assignments, things like that. So they are looking at the whole course and the delivery of that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I noticed that your grades were quite high.
Yeah.
But they're not as high as the ones I've seen. I've watched as several part-time instructors have moved to a hybrid or online format, and I've checked the grades, and talk about grade inflation, it's extraordinary in this case. In one case, 25 students, 23 A's.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering,
tuned.
what's,
Because I'm one of those part-timers.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
okay.
And
But
I
will you
actually-
answer my question? Is the
Yes, he does. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so you get there.
I get there.
All right.
And I thank John for not spoiling that, because I'm saving it till the
Right.
end.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we okay? Did we switch the tower and the laptop?
I'm good.
Okay.
There is nothing there on purpose.
Okay. All right. All right.
Now, just a little tip,
Thanks, Katie.
because
Yep.
when Katie was up using the desktop, did you see the little sun up there? And I have it too. That's Jing. So you heard her talk about Jing. Are you good on your audio, Ryan? We're good. Okay. I'm Tim Hardy, and I thought I'd call this Hybrid Tidbits because I have not yet done online. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you a little background. Then I want to talk about a final exam because that's key to this. My way of doing hybrid, which is by no means magic, it just works for me. What I think the key was, what the results were, that's where it's coming. My opinion and what's next. I work in the econ department and I teach accounting. It turns out that in the folks that teach accounting, we have one full-time person and everybody else is a part-timer. So This class and the one that precedes it are required for about 5 or 6 majors. So probably 90+% of the students we get, they're the predecessor 121 and 122, and they're done with accounting. They literally walk out of the final and they do the brain dump. There are about 500 students a year. 3 or 4 folks teach the course, all part-time. We have a common final exam. That's the key. We never see it. The students see it only at the final exam. But interestingly, those final exam grades are shared. Not the semester grades now, but the final exam grades. So we get an email that everybody that took the exam, this was their final exam score. And then we'll talk about the results. So that's where some of my comparability comes from. It's the same exam for all students. It's 50 questions. It's 2 hours. They're all multiple choice. I don't like that, but that's the way it is. The students must score 50% or better on the final exam, or they can't pass the course, period. Because the email we get back from the department, if they score less than 50%, they've already got their grade assigned. We're told what to assign. They fail. It doesn't matter what else they do during the semester. And all of the kids know about that, and it scares them to death, and shouldn't. And that's just the department policy. So here's my way. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and tell them what you told them. Somebody told me that 40 years ago, and it still works. Now, separately, I've stolen an idea. Your start here, you'll see about that. Okay. But I've stolen that. You'll see that again.
Stealing is allowed here.
I understand. Much of my stuff came from there.
Collaboration, I like that.
So here's what I ask the kids to do. Go read the chapter. Then consider the questions at the end of the chapter. Then they have to go watch a little video. Sometimes it's the author's, sometimes it's mine, sometimes it's comes from somewhere else, but there's one for every learning objective. Then they have to take a quiz on that learning objective, and they have to get a perfect score or they can't go forward. And every time it comes up, the questions are in a different order, and I never tell them which ones were wrong. If there were 8 questions on that quiz, it says your score is 7. In other words, you go figure it out. That works. So now they go to the next learning objective and the next quiz, and they keep doing that till they're finished. They've scored no points yet. This is the gateway to get to the points that count for the semester. And they can't see the second learning objective until they've done the first one. You do it, that's exactly what you're doing. The kids hate it in the beginning of the semester, but at the end of the semester, they'll tell you it works. It got me to do it. I'm so fussy about that that if they just don't do anything for 6 chapters, I'll just start at number 7. They have to go back and do all 6 of them. They have to do everything or they can't get there. So when they're all done, they get to take 1 quiz, 10 questions, 30 minutes, 1 attempt. It has a time it opens, becomes available, and a time it closes, roughly a week. And they get 1 shot. I've also learned that I put a little sample one out there. What day of the, what holiday falls on December 25th? And of course that's Christmas. And it's just 2 questions so they can see how the system works. It's just so they can test it, because I was getting too many emails. Then they go do the homework problems online. They can do them over and over and over and over. Then class meets. This is hybrid now, not online. And we'll talk about the homework problems, and we'll talk about any of the conceptual issues that they have. And then here's the one I like. Then they go take an online quiz, 60 minutes, 1 hour, but it's exactly the same problems as the homework, except it's algorithmic. Every kid in the class gets different numbers. So if you understood how to do the problem, you'll understand those. And these are very valuable points-wise. That first one back there is just to get them to read it. It costs. This one's expensive. 60 minutes, one attempt only. They have 4 tests. The final was how many questions? 50. My tests are 25. The final was 2 hours. Mine is 1 hour. The final's multiple choice. Mine's multiple choice. It's setting them up for the final. For the pace and the question format, the only thing I know about the final is it comes from the author's test bank. So guess where I take my questions? The kids tell me my questions are hard as hell. I mean, my tests are hard as hell, and I've never apologized for that. They say the final's so much easier. At the end of the semester, before the final, I make up a mock final, and we as a class take it in class orally.
So you don't take your questions from the author's test bank?
No, I do.
You do,
I do.
but you choose harder ones.
They must be, because I've never seen the final, and after the fact, the kids tell me that the final's easier than my tests, because they're rated in the test bank. And I spend a few minutes on how to get their magic 50%. Answer the ones you know. Go back to the ones you don't. I mean, that's common sense, you would think by now. Now, the keys, little chunks. John and his team drove that home when I went through the ADP. My learning objective pieces are 10 minutes tops, 7 minutes or less is better, because the kids won't stick with it for 30 minutes or an hour, and I use adaptive release all the time. It's a wonderful tool, and I overlay it with date and time opening and closings. So not only can you not do B till you've done A, but you also must do it within this window or it is forever gone. You keep up or you get lost, and it costs. I put the results on Blackboard and Gradebook. For the tests that they take in class, I try to have I stay after class, grade them, and put them right up on Blackboard. But there's very fast feedback. They know their results within an hour. And I keep a close eye on my email. And this is what I stole. I put a step-to-step on Blackboard in the announcements. Hereafter it's going and start here. But it's do this first, print the syllabus, print this. Then I give them a 20-question quiz on the syllabus that doesn't count for anything, but until you get a perfect score on it, you can't do anything else, nothing. I once had a student take it 37 times. I couldn't believe it. But they got it.
Hopefully they did well in the class.
They did fine. But you'll see. They did fine.
That's 36 emails you didn't have to answer.
And that's very true.
Yeah.
And I also open Blackboard about 10 days before the semester starts. And so there's some stuff they can and or ought to do. Katie has her folks submit things online. I cannot tell you how important it is that the students are using a certified combination. If it's not, and you do not want to be a tech person, you point them to the Blackboard site where it has the combinations. If it matches, they call the Blackboard help folks. If it doesn't match, go use a lab, because that one will drive you nuts. Test it, test it, test it, test it, test it before the semester. And every time I say this, John cringes, but you got to do it as a student. You have a faculty login. You cannot test it as a faculty login. You have to have a student login and then enroll yourself in the class and go be the student. You'll be amazed at what the little things are that you find. Oh. And I make nothing except that final exam, which is not my choice. Nothing is so valuable that it's fatal. The kids have got something due every time the class meets. There is no one thing other than the final that if they simply don't do it, it's fatal. When I was a student, I hated the model of 40% for the midterm, 50% for the final, and 10% for something else. Because if they stub their toe on one of those, they're dead. So I use a 500-point scale. Those 4 tests, they're worth 25 points apiece. But you remember the 60-minute quizzes? Those are worth 100. They're as valuable as the tests in scoring for the semester. So the syllabus quiz I talked about, my counsel to the students is do all the parts. That's the key. Keep up, and if you got a question, ask. Online, email, in class, however you want to do it. So here are the results. All but one of my face-to-face students ever in that class have successfully passed the departmental final, provided they did everything. I'm the only person teaching that class that can say that. And the kids have found out, they know my tests are hard as hell, so now I ask them, why are you here? They said, because I'll get through with you. I've got the best success rate with the class in the department. All the hybrid students have successfully passed the final exam, provided they did all the parts. I've had folks show up and just take the exams and do nothing else. When you do the math, it's impossible to pass based on my syllabus. But there's only one back here that didn't, and I do not know for the life of me why they did not pass the final. For the fall 2009, my section was hybrid. All the other sections were face-to-face, and all the students took the same exam. My students, on average, were 20% better on that common final exam than the face-to-face students. And I emailed John about that, and that's when he said, do this.
I emailed you back and said, can you just state that one more time? So.
I couldn't believe it. But remember, we get everybody's results, but mine were 20%.
You have like what Katie had, where you have you doing hybrid versus you doing face-to-face?
In other
I
words,
don't have a table for that.
Yeah.
But as just what, because that in a way would be, controlling for you as an
For you.
instructor.
Well,
correct,
But-
correct.
But yeah, sort of. In your case, you're making up your final.
Right.
In my case,
Right, I'm not standardized, right.
right, in my case, for that class, in effect, here's the book, get them ready.
Right. But you talked the course before, right? I'm just saying, if you did it face-to-face, how are your?
I didn't do I haven't done the math, but they were better.
The hybrid
They were
was-
up some, but they weren't up this much. They weren't up this much.
So you attribute it to the hybrid style, is what you're saying?
The kids have to do the work the way I've designed it. They
Right.
have to do the work.
Right, but I think what we're trying to understand is how much of it is because it was the hybrid where they're partially online and partially face-to-face as compared to only face-to-face.
I think it's an interesting question because it sort of raises, if we go back to sort of the quality matters where you're looking at the course design versus your delivery, at what point do you say that boundary blurs? I agree with what David is asking is, if you control for the instructor as a variable, what is the value or the difference that you're making as the instructor? And if you had your past results before you went hybrid, that would be interesting to see how that bears out. But I also think that what you're seeing here is how does the design of the course contribute to it. Now, what would be interesting is to take this same design and have somebody else teach it. To take that course, you know, and maybe have another.
Since this is on tape, I'm gonna get killed for this, but no one else that teaches accounting has expressed, to my knowledge, has expressed any interest in doing anything hybrid. To my knowledge.
That's a good point, because I have another instructor here at main campus that I kind of has used my shell, so to speak, and is teaching it hybrid, the same way that I am. I should actually kind of add that to the results, like what are her scores? Because I hear what you're asking, those grades. I think these grades are higher than in most of my courses. I also think this is a, you know, more of an intro level course, and you know, the work isn't as hard in terms of the assignments, but I should look at that, you know, if you give if the same instructors are kind of doing the same model, what are the results in terms of the
And part of the
assignment
premise
grades?
behind Quality Matters, which I know, Tim, you haven't gone through, but it's sort of a similar kind of blueprint that you're developing. There is the idea of sort of reusable kinds of objects or courses. Now, I'm not always sure how that theory actually plays out, how realistic it is. If you take the same course, have somebody else teach it, is it interchangeable parts? I have some concerns about that, of sort of like the kind of modularity, if you will, of a plug-and-play instructor. I'm not wanting to go there, but I think it does raise some interesting questions. If you could look at your past results before you went hybrid, and then also take the same design. Now, you may not have had anybody express interest, but if over time the results stand up, I would hope that the department would want to investigate and suggest that maybe somebody, if only to test the theory, somebody else teach the course and see if the variable of the instructor plays out as well.
That, of course, is up to others.
Yeah,
We
I
as
understand.
part-timers have no say about anything, not even the weather. Very.
Tim, have you noticed the scores going up or changing at all since you've been doing hybrid? How many times have you done hybrid now?
Did hybrid in the fall, did hybrid in the winter, and am doing it this spring.
Oh,
So
So
the
you
winter,
never really had
and we've never offered it in the winter before, so this was a maiden voyage.
yeah.
I mean, the department's never offered 122 in the winter.
And that's
Uh,
4 weeks, right?
Actually, it's 3 weeks and 2 days,
Yeah.
and within there's one holiday.
So
It
that's
is
quite
brutal.
different than.
In winter school, we move at 1 chapter a week. In fall and spring, 1 chapter a week, and in winter session, it's 5 chapters a week. I mean, it
And your
is,
scores were still high?
and they went up slightly,
Wow.
slightly.
Well, somebody should- so
And I don't know whether that's because of the compression.
Yeah.
the 8
I mean, you have nothing else to do. This is all you can do for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and then you pass the exam and do the brain dump. I don't know.
I saw that, and I also saw, you know, I think that the idea that it's only one course that you're focusing on, it's, you know, I was labeling it 3.5 weeks, but it is just shy of that. And I also thought too, is that students, you know, this whole idea of kind of taking ownership of it, I know this has kind of come up both in hybrid and online. I mean, you really have to own this and make the commitment to make it work, and you will be successful if you kind of take the ownership of it and do it. And as an instructor, I kind of like that, a little bit different than in the face-to-face. I mean, they are taking ownership there too, but I feel like in the online or hybrid, they really are accountable to,
Yeah.
you know, getting through the work, and they know what they need to do to get there.
We got just
I'm
a couple
sorry.
minutes left.
Right.
I want to make sure that Tim's got his time.
To
for-
say the least, I was delighted, and so were they. So here's my opinion. My first trip through, I was nervous as a cat. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
You were worried that you were gonna get it right, because here were these kids that were paying $1,000 or whatever it is a class, and if you didn't want to let them down. 'Tis more comfy now. It worked, and I like it.
Yep, I like it.
So what's next? In the winter, we did this hybrid for the first time. This summer, I've asked the department to do this online so I'm nervous again. And in the fall, everything I'm doing is hybrid. The upper division and the lower division as well. I'll never go back. The kids like it, and I like it. It's much more work in the beginning.
It seems to me one of the keys to your success, and you tell me if I'm right, is the preparation they have to do before the course actually opens. And then once they get in there, that adaptive release stuff.
You couldn't make this work without adaptive release, in my opinion, because it lets you both control when the course becomes available through the semester, so they're not tempted to, somebody just, I'll do it all the first 2 weeks and then I'll go drink beer. But separately, that it's per student. So each one goes at their own pace.
But do they fall behind and really have to catch up?
I've had that happen.
And they
Now,
can do it?
the quizzes that count, once that date closes, they're gone. But the stuff that doesn't count, that is the gateway, if you will, they have to go back and do that. Because my thinking was, if I didn't make them do that, then they'd skip it and they'll try to get through the final and they won't make it. I've actually had one lad, the only time I ever saw him was for the tests, and he could not understand at the end why he got an F. He did well on the tests, but they were only 40% of the grade. He could not pass the class. And when he walked out, I told him, I don't know what you scored, but you can't pass. So he came back for a repeat this spring. He's doing the same thing.
So
Yeah.
you obviously like it, but I was just wondering, in terms of your net time, how has that changed between hybrid versus face-to-face? You know, including
There are
prep
three-
time and everything.
There are three answers to that. The first time you go through, it's unbelievable how much it is. And you really want to build the whole thing before the semester ever starts, which John and his folks tried to tell us, but you had to force yourself to do that. Second, once you've got it set up, all you're doing next time is, what am I going to leave the same and what am I going to change? Tweak it. And you dread the day there's a change of edition.
I agree with that completely.
Right.
I think the first time, you know, as much as you're prepared or organized, it's never enough.
Right.
But the second time, there's so much that you can reuse and recycle.
Right.
And there's so much more knowledge that you have that really it's the tweaking. And I think that's what, for me, makes the course better and better each time I teach it, is that I'm really able to spend the time investing, making the tweaks. I'm not having to go to class maybe physically as much, but the
Right.
tweaks, you're spending that time doing that. It makes the course really run like a well-oiled machine.
I actually lift a prior semester completely out of Blackboard and copy it in the new one, and then go make the changes I want to make, as opposed to go just build it again. That just, it's less work.
Well, great, and we're right on time, so thank you very much, both Katie and Tim.
Our pleasure.
Jody also just joined you. Jody, she's one of my closest friends, and I realized when you were social worker.